Hello everybody and welcome to Bridgewater Bus Station. Now if you recall back to last year, I did something called the Somerset Super Loop, where I tried to do a loop around Somerset using rural and maybe not so rural buses. Now that was a big success, the video got quite a lot of views and mainly I really enjoyed filming it. Now today this would take that to the next level. I would still enjoy it, but it ended up being quite stressful in the end. And I would be filming all of this in a day, whereas last year I did the Somerset Super Loop in stages over a week. I think it took about 4 days, with one of the other days being a free day. Anyway, what I'm doing today is visiting Somerset's 5 biggest towns, even though one of them is a city, but I can't really bother to say Somerset's 5 biggest places. Yeah, it just doesn't sound as good as towns. Now, this is basically the reverse of the Somerset Super Loop. I didn't actually realise that. I just saw a video on YouTube of somebody visiting Leicestershire's 5 biggest towns. I think it was Leicestershire. It could have been a different county. And I thought, why don't I do the same for Somerset? And it turns out it is very similar to the Somerset Super Loop I did last year. Now, Bridgewater is one of the 5 biggest towns, with the other one being Taunton. Just so conveniently, the number 21 bus service links them in around about 40 minutes. So my first bus was the First Bus 21 service. I'll be taking this across to Taunton, and this was formed by one of the new electric Yutong U11 DDs, which seem to operate the route quite often now, but every now and again there is usually a diesel bus along the route.
The next stop is Angel Place.
As I leave Bridgewater Bus Station, you can see the Bury Superfast 1 service heading towards London Hammersmith, running a few minutes late, still boarding passengers, as this can be a very busy service. Here I am in North Petherton, laying over at the various bus stop because we're running a few minutes early. I wish it was like that throughout the day. Unfortunately it wasn't. However, here we did manage to pass one of the diesel duties along the 21 route. Here I am on one of the faster sections between North Petherton and Monks and Heathfield. This is a nice fast section, especially if you've got one of the older Enviro 400 Tridents or the E300s.
Bus stops. Every town. The next stop is Market House.
Here I am arriving at Taunton Parade, which is the centre of Taunton. Now here I'll be transitioning onto the 30 bus service to head across to Ilminster. Now you might be thinking, Fred, yeah, it makes sense that Taunton is one of the other big towns, but Ilminster? Surely not. Well, actually, the third biggest town I'd be visiting is Yeovil, but I'd be taking a slightly different way to what I did last time, maybe a more obscure way. Speaking of obscure things, here is one of the training Volvo P7RLE Right urban buses passing through the town centre. I quite like the look of these, even if they're not in passenger service anymore. Here is my number 30 bus currently standing at one of the Parade bus stops. A number of bus services, including the 30, depart from this stop. As well as that, you can change for the 54 service, which heads directly across to Yeovil, but that runs every 2 hours, and well, I was stuck here in the hour that wasn't the hour when the 54 departs, as well as the 6 town service and the 374 heading all the way to Bristol. Now, this was one of the Enviro 400s, which I wouldn't call a trident, but technically it is a trident, but it's not a proper trident like some of the other Enviro 400s we have here in Somerset. However, this did choose to operate with Arriva London, and unlike the tridents, or the proper tridents I should say, this did transition straight from London down to Somerset. The older Enviro 400s, which are the ones I would traditionally call Enviro 400 tridents, actually went to Leicester, Bristol and Weston-super-Mare before transitioning to Taunton Depot, which by the looks of things is their final place before they head up to Heaven or to the scrapyard or wherever you say they go. In my opinion, they should be preserved, but unfortunately not everybody has the time, money or the same opinion as me. Anyway, here I am now, speeding along the A358, coming up to Thorn Falcon, on my way to Ilminster. Here I am arriving into the centre of Ilminster. It's quite a small town, but nevertheless it is a town, and from here on the bus did get quite busy, although saying that I did actually get off, so it wasn't that busy. I've seen it busier before. Now, this is one of the tighter changes, not the tightest. However, this was the tight connection I did manage to make, and this is onto the Somerset Council 18 service. Now, if I'd missed this bus, there was no turning back, because, well, there's no backup plan. I would have to go back home and try and do this another day. Anyway, here goes the 30 bus towards Chardon Axminster. Meanwhile, I've got this Volkswagen Transporter Meloticana minibus, which is absolute junk, but at least it was a bus that actually ran. I'd be taking this across to South Petherton, and I believe this bus only runs on Tuesdays and Fridays. It could be Tuesdays and Thursdays though, I can't quite remember. Basically, it only runs on specific days of the week, and therefore, if you miss it, there's no turning back, because it only runs a few times a day, and well, once you get to South Petherton, there's not exactly a great bus service there either. Now, I would have thought this bus service would have been more busy, especially since the countryside was brilliant, and it's quite a useful link if you want to get from Ilminster to Yeovil, as there is quite a useful changeover point in South Petherton onto the 81 service. Hint hint, that would be my next bus service. There goes that number 18 bus, which is operated by Somerset Council and was a Meloticana minibus on a Volkswagen Transporter. I can't remember which way around it was. Was it a Volkswagen chassis or a Volkswagen body? I can't remember which way round it was. Anyway, there goes that bus along to South Petherton Hospital. Now, I was going to get the South West Coaches 81 bus into Yeovil from this bus stop, but that meant more waiting. And what I didn't realise is that it actually came along about 10 to 15 minutes first and then did a loop around South Petherton. So here I am doing the small loop via a few housing estates and the hospital. After passing through villages such as Stokes-upon-Hamden and Montacute, and now before we arrive into Yeovil bus station, this bus actually had a very community feel to it. I didn't expect it to be as community orientated. Anyway, here I am arriving into Yeovil bus station after passing through those villages, as well as Yeovil Borough, located right in the centre of Yeovil. My next bus would be the number 1 service. However, first, let's do a quick bus spotting here at Yeovil bus station, which is great on weekdays for bus spotting, as well as just seeing bus services in general. Here I am now on my number 1 bus service. This would take me from my 3rd biggest town to Shepton Mallet, which would just be a changeover point and isn't actually a very big town at all. It looks like this Optare Solo is ex-Western Greyhound, which used to operate bus services across Devon and Cornwall, but I could be wrong. It just has a similar interior to Southwest Coaches 166, which is an Optare Solo SR, and is actually ex-Western Greyhound. Anyways, this bus was actually quite nice. It had a slightly strange interior and seat layout. However, the seats themselves were quite comfortable compared to other seats on some of these Optare vehicles, and it had tray tables, which would be quite useful if you had a small snack or you had to use your phone on this bus. Anyway, this is one of the more longer legs, and this would take me nearly 2 hours up the road to Shepton Mallet at the Cenotaph, and this would be where things fall apart quite majorly. Not that I'd actually realised it yet. Anyway, here I am leaving Yeovil bus station alongside this MMC heading towards Bristol. Maybe I should have taken that. Here I am speeding along through one of the many villages along this route, mainly between Yeovil and Sparkford, with Sparkford, along with Castle Carey further up the route, being one of the only major points along the route, and well, both of those places aren't exactly major. Now, as much as I love 6-pot Optare buses, yes, Yeovil does have some good buses. Unfortunately, 6-pot E200s, but a 6-pot Optare will do, especially when there are street lights about. However, this bus was becoming slower and slower and later, and even being 3 or 4 minutes late was not ideal, considering I had a 1-minute connection at Shepton Mallet Cenotaph, and if I missed that, well, it put me an hour behind, which wasn't exactly great, I'll be honest. I didn't think it would affect me too much, but in the end it affected me massively. Anyway, here I am passing through Castle Carey on this amazing bus. Let's enjoy this moment before it ends up being completely ruined, mainly by this Castle Carey station. Nobody was waiting, the driver could see that from the main road, yet we still decided to make the loop, which costed us about a minute or two, which wasn't great to be honest. Here I am now in Shepton Mallet. Unfortunately, we had about a 6 or 8 minute delay along the route somewhere, I'm not too sure where. I think it's in the Evercreech area where the timetable gets quite tight. And well, this bin lorry wasn't really doing us much help. Therefore, I missed the bus. I tried to avoid looking on bustimes.org, hoping that that would mean that somehow, by the power of magic or the universe or whatever, because I banned myself from looking on bustimes.org on this particular journey, I would have made the bus, but unfortunately not, and here goes the bus heading off to Dobby's Garden Centre. Meanwhile, I had nearly an hour here in Shepton Mallet, which wasn't great. There's not very much to do, apart from look around an absolutely gigantic Tesco store. Now, this was not great. At this point, I was like 2 hours down, at least. I think it was either an hour or two. I can't particularly remember. And well, this would affect me massively later on in the journey, especially when I get to Bath, where the traffic wasn't great along one of the other bus routes. Anyway, let's enjoy Shepton Mallet and do some bus spotting. Just because it's a small town doesn't mean it doesn't get any buses. Yeah, and there you can see, I would have even got one of the West Bus branded MMCs. That was a real shame. Here is one of the other buses that serve Shepton Mallet on a less regular basis. The 162 service operated by Frome Bus, which heads off to Frome. I would have never have guessed. Anyway, here's my next bus, which will take me to one of the other large and possibly the largest place on this list today, which is Bath, which is of course a city renowned for its history and less renowned, but still renowned, for its good bus system and bus station. Honestly, I absolutely love the bus station in Bath, but first I had to get to it. Luckily, I had an MMC on this run as well. No, it wasn't a West Bus branded one, but an MMC is an MMC, and I honestly don't mind them, considering I regularly get these Yutong pieces of junk. Here I am arriving into Midsummer Norton, where they have recently added a few new bus stops. I can't remember what this stop is called, I think it's called the Hollies, but I could be wrong, but this is where most of the bus services congregate within the town, and there are actually quite a few surprisingly. Anyway, here I am enjoying the views as we make our way beyond Bradstock and Peasdown St John, heading into the hills towards Bath. Now, although we were late at some stage in the journey, we weren't actually too late, but unfortunately we were late enough for me to miss a late running A4 service. Now you may be wondering, Fred, why was that A4 bus running late? Well, it was running late because of traffic, and unfortunately I would get held up in that same traffic a bit later on. As for now, let's do some bus filming here in Bath City Centre, where buses go crazy. Honestly, there's loads of them. There are buses in the bus station, outside of the bus station. They even stop in places not so near the bus station, such as up at the Bath Abbey. Here you can see the bus station along with an ex-Portway Park on Ride, I think the green livery is, MMC. Here is a Fairsaver bus. Fairsaver operate a few routes here alongside First Bus. Here are some E200 MMCs leaving Bath bus station on some local city services. These are wearing what I call the fake Bath City liveries. They've basically been adapted from their old liveries. Sure, the Cymru Clipper livery on the first E200 MMC doesn't look too bad, but having the Bath City livery in a red version, it just doesn't look good. Yeah, considering that the rest of the buses are all blue here, such as this E200. Anyway, as you can see, my air-decker service has now arrived and is currently on layover. These buses are actually really nice, but first, here's an open topper, the Volvo B9 to be exact. Here I am leaving Bath bus station, or just outside on Dorchester Street, alongside that Fairsaver Volvo B9TL. I really like this air-decker bus. Before, I have actually gotten the MMC in the picture on the front of that leaflet. For starters, I thought it was pretty good they had a leaflet. Most bus companies don't even have paper timetables anymore, especially First Bus. Especially in Somerset, they've really cut down on their paper timetables, along with Bristol, Bath and the West, I think. However, the air-decker service wasn't good enough for me, and later on in the journey it did get stuck in traffic. But at least I was on a B5 Evo Settee to enjoy the traffic. Honestly, this bus was really nice. I like the fact they had a paper timetable and map showing connections to and from the airport as well. And as well as that, the bus had next stop announcements and destination screens, as well as tables. And I think it might have had USB ports as well, which I really didn't expect for this kind of service, considering that the service has been in slow deterioration. However, the EVO cities are quite new and aren't as bad, or in my opinion good, as the last few buses that have operated. For example, they used to have some B7 ALX 400s along here. Not very good for the average passenger, but for me, that would have been brilliant and would have probably made my journey. Anyway, here I am making my way through Bath city centre.
The next stop is Nile Street. The next stop is
Here I am making my way through Keynsham, which currently has a town service operated by the Big Lemon. Here I am passing air deckers only in 500 mmc while stuck in traffic, along with that mmc, which is also stuck in traffic in the suburbs of South Bristol, through Hengrove, Hartcliffe, Knoll, Bishop's Wood, I think. I'm not too familiar with this area, I probably got that wrong. Either way, I do know this area well enough that I know the traffic is absolutely horrible here, and it doesn't help that the traffic around Bristol Airport isn't very good either. So for starters, I ended up missing the A3 airport flyer service from Bristol Airport to Weston. Yes, it meant I could go and get a few biscuits from M&S in the new transport hub, and yes, it did mean I got a nice view of this reservoir on the approach to Bristol Airport, but it meant I was now 1 or 2 or even 3 buses behind what I should have been, and well, as you're going to see it towards the end of this video, it didn't go well with the last bus of the day. Anyway, here I am arriving into the new transport interchange at Bristol Airport, which is still pretty good. I've got to be honest, although it's a bit plain and it's a bit naff to be honest, it's better than some of the other bus stations I've seen, including my local one in Bridgewater. Then again, Highbridge and Burnham don't even have a bus station, although there is not really a need for it. It barely gets any buses. Here I am now at Bristol Airport Public Transport Interchange, where you can see a number of other local and interurban buses, and here is a map of the buses that depart from here, as well as coaches. Alongside the air decker and the airport flyer towards Bristol, here is the airport flyer A3 heading towards Weston-super-Mare. Weston-super-Mare would be my final big town, and whilst I would technically complete the loop and visit all of the large towns, well, you can see what's coming, can't you? Before that, let's enjoy some more bus pictures I got here whilst leaving Bristol Airport on this A3 in Varo 200 MMC, which used to operate with First Essex and wore the Essex bus livery. As I leave the airport, I cannot stress how bad it is that First West of England, or First Bristol, Bath and the West if you want to be technological, are putting Volvo B9TLs on the A1 service. That is really bad. Sure, I love a good old stretch on the B9s, and well, it's better than having overcrowded buses, but they're not as good as the airport flyer buses from a normal passenger's perspective. They don't even have USB ports, let alone luggage racks or cables or any of that good stuff. Although saying that, I'm not sure if the regular Scanias on the A1 even have cables. But they don't have luggage racks or USB ports, which is something that passengers, especially coming from worldwide, do expect on our buses, and well, pretty much all of them don't have it, especially in this part of the country. Anyway, here I am cutting down the side lanes of Bristol Airport, and here I am coming out near Coingresbury. Here I am arriving at Royal Terminus. Here things were looking pretty dire. I was around 3 or 4 minutes late, and that couldn't be fine. It just wasn't fine. And for worse, that Yutong U11DD that was sat in one of the other bays of the terminus left before us, and that was an X1 towards Western, and we would be following that. Luckily, later on in the video, we managed to overtake it, but well, things didn't go well, although they did start looking a little bit brighter. Anyway, Royal Terminus is kind of a small hub for local bus services in this area, and is the only other major hub in this area outside of Western Supermare itself. A number of town buses, including the 6, 7, and quite possibly the 9 as well as interurban bus services such as the X1 we've just overtaken, pass through Royal Terminus. Anyway, here is the end of the video. Here I'm arriving into Western Supermare, thinking it's... Oh, was it? Yeah, it was 6:03. Sorry for the shadiness, I can't particularly remember what time it was. But it was 6:03. The 20 bus, which would mean I fully complete the loop, left at 6:05. Yes, I'm going to make it, I'm going to get home. But yet, where's the 20 bus? There was a bus in its spot, but it was out of service, which soon drove off. Well, it kinda left early, and it didn't even track properly. Half the time it was tracking on the first bus, half the time it wasn't, and it didn't even track at all on bus 24, it hadn't even tracking in bay. But speaking to the drivers, it left a few minutes early, which meant that my 1 minute connection was screwed, even though I actually made it since I arrived at 6:04. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I have completed it. I visited all Somerset's 5 biggest places, mainly towns with the exception of Bath, but unfortunately I had to make a walk I was hoping not to make this evening, or just a walk from the interchange in Western to Western Supermare railway station. Anyway, since I didn't complete the loop anyways, there was no point going into Bridgewater. So here I am ending off the video at my local station, Highbridge and Burnham.